Hello, welcome to the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation's virtual discussion, Managing Grief Over the Holidays. My name is Heather Held, and I am the National Family Support Programs Manager. We are honored to have you joining us today for this open discussion for you, our bereaved families. Today, we will hear from Kate Zera Kray, a psychotherapist specializing in grief, along with 3 bereaved parents. This panel will provide personal and professional insights to help you navigate the holiday season. We'll then open it up for questions from all of you. Before I introduce our panelists, I have a few guidelines to review. You are muted for this discussion, and please make sure that your video is off. We will welcome questions during and after the opening remarks. Please type your questions into the chat feature found at the bottom of your Zoom window. Feel free to ask questions of Kate and also questions you might want to ask of another parent. We will not get to every question today, but we will try to get to as many as possible. At the end of today's webinar, you will have an opportunity to turn on your videos, see each other, and honor together the memories of your children. Today is for you and about you, and we hope that you feel supported. It is now my pleasure to introduce our panelists this evening. Kate Zera Kray, LCSW, is a psychotherapist with a private practice in Decatur, Georgia. Originally from Chicago, Kate obtained her BSW from the University of Iowa and her MSW from Loyola University of Chicago. She has been practicing in the Atlanta area since 2005 in a few settings, including working with the pediatric brain tumor population at the Aflac Cancer Center at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Kate facilitates groups from a place of empathy and compassion with a goal of creating a nurturing space for members to learn from one another as they seek their paths towards healing. Kelly Tracy is mother to 2 beautiful sons, Matthew, Eternal Star Forever 13, and Cameron, 17, and has been married to her husband, Mike, for 30 years. Kelly believes strongly in the importance of giving back to the organizations and community that were instrumental in providing support, guidance, and inspiration to her family throughout Matthew's 9-year fight against a brain tumor, as well as since his passing on Mother's Day of 2009. Jenny Wilson lives in Florida with her husband, Matt, and daughter, Devin. In September 2013, at just 7 years old, her son, Mason, was diagnosed with a glioblastoma. He was fun, athletic, happy kid that loved skateboarding, baseball, riding his bike, and just being a kid. Sadly, Mason lost his battle 5 days before his 11th birthday in February of 2017. In her own words, Jenny shared with me, "Our life has never been the same. My daughter Devin was 12 when Mason passed. They were very close, and she was completely devastated. Learning to navigate this new way of life has been so hard for us." Gary Painter is a professor in the USC Sol Price School of Public Policy in his professional life. In his personal life, he is a bereaved parent of Jenna Grace Painter, who passed away from a glioblastoma multiforme on December 24th of 2006. A little over 3 years after Jenna passed away, he and his wife, Patricia, helped to start a bereavement camp called We Can Have Hope, which is now part of PBTF in the Western region. This camp has run every year until this year, 2020, when it was canceled due to COVID-19. It is now my pleasure and honor to turn this evening over to Kate.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to you all, and thanks for being here. I really want to start by commending you for showing up to something like this. Perhaps some of you have done one of these in the past. depending when your child passed away. For others, this could be a brand new experience. So either way, I really do commend you and respect your decision. And I hope it's the right decision. If as we go, it doesn't feel right, I won't know actually if you log off or log back on. So please practice self-care. That's a theme for tonight. So please practice that. And we'll start with the first slide here. I chose the word navigating for a couple reasons. I've learned in doing a lot of work in the grief and loss community that there's words that some people really appreciate and there's others that people despise. And sometimes it could be the same word. So I try to choose my words carefully, but please feel free to insert whatever resonates most for you tonight. So let's go on to the next slide. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this image. It actually takes my breath away. As a mom myself, it takes my breath away every time I see it. I like how the person says that it's an attempt at describing how a parent feels after losing a child, because I don't know that you could fully do it justice. I can't relate to that particular loss, but I imagine that this could resonate for some of you. What we do know is that losing a child is often called the hardest loss of all losses. In fact, there's no word for it. If you lose a parent, or parents plural, you become an orphan. If you lose a spouse or partner, you become a widow or widower. I have some very wise and clever people in some of my groups, and they have told me over the years that there are many choice words that they have come up for this, but none, I guess, that have been published. It's out of sequence. It is one of the strongest attachments that we will ever have in our lives. So to have that broken prematurely, as you all can relate to, is devastating. Let's go on. So some of you might be wondering why they chose to start with a therapist and not a parent. And I want to assure you that I will not pretend or make any assumptions on how you feel. I'm sure you hear that a lot. This little cartoon here is just one of many. I found several that could have worked, but it's just one of those things that I hear from parents in my groups talk about, that if they say they lost their son at age 17 and he never got to go to college, and a well-intentioned neighbor says, oh, well, my son's 18 and I know how you feel because he's at college and I miss him when he's at school. That is so unfair. And I'm sorry if any of you have heard such things. Let's go on. So I'm showing up with you all tonight for these reasons. I know there's a lot of words on there, so I can just kind of summarize it some. As Heather shared in the introduction, I'm a social worker by training, and I worked in a hospital in Chicago for a couple of years before we moved to Atlanta in 2005. So I knew I wanted to work in hospitals with families, but the pediatric brain tumor population was new to me in 2005. And I learned so much, and I saw so much pain. I saw so much resilience. I learned a great deal from the kids and parents alike. And now I still do some grief groups in the community. Some of you might be familiar with Camp Sunshine, which is a great resource that I do want people to know about. Like many resources, they are virtual now. So I believe that you could access them for sure anywhere in Georgia and perhaps out of state as well. They have a monthly support group there. So on the right side of this column, I do want to point out a few things that I have heard anecdotal stories. I have seen parents smile again. It's not one of those, adages that doesn't maybe hold a lot of water, that time heals. That's not what I'm suggesting, but I am suggesting that I have seen people incrementally get better in their pain. So let's get started with the next slide here. It would be nice if there was something that made sense relative to grief. I like to say all bets are kind of off. There's lots and lots of stages out there. Many people are familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work. She was, I believe it was like the late 60s, 70s. The thing I'll say about that is that, and if there's any clinicians on tonight, some people, and you know, anybody might know this, but it was actually, those stages were actually designed for when somebody was dying, going through the process of dying, sick, and probably geared more for adults as well. But there is, you know, something that people hear it a lot. It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and the final stage in this modality is called acceptance. I have always struggled with that word acceptance, and we can talk more about that, but I think it's a big ask to accept the fact that your child died when you did not want that to happen. So we'll talk again more about the stages, but what we do know, it's not linear, it's messy, and that's why one of the reasons that we're here tonight. So next slide, which is another cartoon. The cartoon's not meant to be funny. To be clear, it just felt real. I collect quotes and cartoons. Now I guess a new form of that are memes, right? And people give them to me sometimes or email them to me. So some of what I'm sharing today have actually come from other bereaved parents. So I do want people to know that. But this is a good segue. I'll pause for a moment if you just want to get to the last box. So we know that some people get it wrong in our lives. I'm actually probably more of a realist. I don't consider myself an optimist per se, but I do want to believe relative to grief that people want to get it right. Your coworkers, your parents, your neighbors, people want to get it right, but sometimes the intention is there, but the words are not. So I want to read something to you all, and you are welcome to close your eyes or just get comfortable for a moment. First, I'm going to read the 10 worst things to say to a grieving person. This has been adapted a few times. This is currently on a website, Kate's Club, that I'll tell you more about in a little bit. I'm just going to read them. 1, stop crying, you're making it worse. You should let your emotions out or you'll feel worse later. At least he's not suffering anymore. You must be strong, or along those lines, God never gives us more than we can handle. God must have wanted her. Don't dwell on it. I know exactly how you feel. At least he was old enough to live a full life. You're lucky. At least you have money. Now I'll adapt that one. That is more for spouses, but it's been 6 months, a year, 10 years, insert whatever pertains to you, please. And it's time to move on. Again, these are things I would never say to anyone. And I hope that no one's ever said these to you. Now to shift gears with that, I'm going to read some of the best things to say to a grieving person. And hopefully you find comfort and solace in some of these as well. I'm sorry for your loss. Please know that I'm here for you. You're in my thoughts and prayers. Remember, you can call me at any hour. He was such a wonderful person. I really don't know what to say. I can't imagine what you're going through. Would you like to talk about it? I'm listening. How are you feeling? Or more specifically, really, how are you feeling? in this moment, on this day. I brought you a meal to eat or freeze. It's in disposable containers, so you don't have to return anything. So let those kind of sit with you. And maybe there's something that you're really eager to share that was really helpful. And I encourage you to maybe jot it down and then let go of that thought so you can come back to this moment. Probably more importantly, if there's something that somebody said to you that really upset you, I hope you can allow yourself to let that thought go in this moment. And let's move on. So this picture I like for a lot of reasons, but I don't know how many people have seen the movie Inside Out. It was a Pixar, it's an animated movie. Although a lot of my adult clients, even if they don't have children in their lives, that movie resonated with them. Anyway, it follows the main character and the main character, Riley, you get to see her emotions. So anger is personified, sadness, joy, and you get to discuss, you get to see how they kind of coexist. And this is a good segue because I like to believe that all parts of us are welcome. I believe that in general, whether or not I'm working with an individual who has experienced grief or not, people tend to over-identify with an emotion. Maybe somebody's told them over the years, oh, you're a narcissist, or you're an angry person, or you're a pessimist, or you're this, and lots of name calling, essentially. So internally, we tend to identify with those things as if it's the truth, the only truth. And our internal critics will really drill that into us. And the problem is when that happens with grief, to me, it's like nails on a chalkboard. When people are hard on themselves for grieving, there's a lot of work that I feel like I need to do as their therapist, as a group facilitator, to help that not be the case. So we can, if you glance at this, essentially the parts is another way of saying feelings, emotions, aspects of us. You might hear people say, I have a side of me that's more introverted. I have a side that can get angry, but I tend to internalize it. This kind of illustrates all those emotions coexisting as multifaceted beings. So we'll flip to the next page and it might crystallize some of this. So this modality is called internal family systems. Again, I want to respect that there might be clinicians on here, but this really is geared for parents. And I don't want to get in the weeds about it, but I've been studying this modality since 2014, and I believe that it's actually simple, but there's a lot of nuances to it. So the main takeaway, my hope for you, is that when you have those feelings that show up of guilt, of shame, kind of that bargaining stage that I referenced in the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, that would look like, oh my gosh, why didn't we let Tommy do proton beam radiation? Why didn't we let Ella do more chemo, the trial, even though she could have had side effects? What if it could have been life-saving in her case? It's the what ifs, it's the replaying, it's the stuff that I'm sorry that if that is what you are doing. So if and when those voices show up and have you believe that you did something wrong as a parent or the medical team did something wrong, instead of kind of coming down hard on that emotion and, showing up or colluding with it, let's start with that, colluding with it, like, yes, if only. And I've seen some spouses turn on each other. I don't judge that. I can only imagine that would be the case or could be the case in some instances. But if and when that happens, I just invite you to either ask that emotion that's very intense. You'll know those emotions, when they take the wheel, so to speak, they tend to show up. We sometimes feel them in our body. Heart might be racing. We might turn red, get angry. If and when those show up, I invite you to look at the middle of the circle. And the self qualities are 8 words that begin with a C. calmness, curiosity, compassion. To be clear, this is not suggesting that that's how you should, in quotes, or could handle grief. It's more when those intense emotions show up, I would hope that that internal critic that we identified isn't then saying, yeah, what's wrong with you? Why do you get mad? Or how come you haven't cried ever? I've known some parents that have not cried, and that is not good or bad. And on the flip side of that, why can you not stop crying? It's been, some people are watching the clock for us, and that's not okay. It's been 6 months, it's been 10 years. Why are you still crying every single day? If you're getting that feedback from others, that's hard enough. We can't always control that. We can distance ourselves from people in our lives, but if you're getting that real time from your internal critics, I would really hope that something like this could be something you could lean into to meet those strong feelings with compassion. I know this is not the outcome you wanted. I know that you're angry. I know that you're sad. And let's see how I can tend to that. So this is a psychologist named Richard Schwartz. On the left side, there's a website if you're curious about obtaining resources from there. The last thing on there, Derek Scott, I like his work a lot. He is a therapist in Canada, and I've only worked with him virtually, but he does a lot with how this modality can be applied to the grief world. And he has some free videos on his website and some really dense articles that he's written, if you're curious about another way to look at things. Okay, next slide. So I couldn't have this talk without addressing the pandemic and the quarantine that we're in. Loneliness, some people are calling it the loneliness pandemic. People are feeling very isolated. And I also want to point out a few things. I intentionally use this picture. I don't know this person. This is something from the internet, of course, but I picked this one with the medical mask because multiple people, both adults, grieving spouses, but more notably for this talk, people grieving the loss of a child, talk about how jarring it is that everyone is now wearing the medical mask that they so associate with the time their child was going through treatment. So whatever that means to you, again, I hope you can create a lot of space and grace, and it would make sense that your system could be activated because it's memorable and being in those rooms. So I wanted to name that. So this reduces how holidays might look for some of you. Yes, you can maybe gather outside, or different cities or different people have different philosophies on it. But by and large, it reduces a hug if you wanted them from people, a distraction to be at someone else's house, and so many other things. We'll talk about that more on the panel and with the questions that follow. But actually, let's flip to the next slide. I want to make sure we get through everything, and then I can circle back to some of this. So some of the more tangible things, I didn't want to inundate you and overwhelm you. I actually have, I think, pages and pages of resources, but I wanted to start with a few of these. So this is for kids support. So this is if you have kids in your home, siblings trying to cope with the loss of their brother or sister, maybe people in the classroom. I've known teachers that have reached out to want to know how to maybe, honor the child in the class who has died, things like that. So you can take a glance at these, and we can probably follow up and send these to you as well, so we can keep moving with this. But I do want to say that, again, the local ones, I included the California one, knowing that there's a lot of people here. I'm so glad to hear about the camp that Gary hopefully will talk about more. I didn't realize that, being in Atlanta. So, okay, so let's go to the next slide. All right, so one of the main reasons we're here, parental support, right? This is you, this is all of you. Again, it's not meant to be condescending or funny, but I really really want to thank you all for showing up. To me, that's a start. So I'm big into options. Maybe it's because I'm not very decisive. I don't know, but I'm extremely into options relative to grief. For any of those folks that might be on here and have worked with me before or been in one of my groups, there's a few things that I probably sound like a broken record. What we'll start with is trial and error. This is important to know about grief in general and grief in the holidays, grief during the holidays. This pressure or this notion of I have to do everything the exact same way this Thanksgiving as it was last Thanksgiving because this is the first one without our child, that is, I'm going to go with that's a misnomer. You don't have to actually do anything. If it's helpful and useful to keep the traditions, again, I would try it. And if it works and you want to keep doing that, do it again and again and again. But instead of putting that pressure on yourself, I would take one holiday at a time. Also, some people like the idea of doing something totally new. Traveling, again, definitely restrictions around that in some cases now. Or some people, you know, they struggle with if they celebrate Christmas, for instance, putting up a tree or not. Do we decorate because we have other children in the home, or this was our only child who died and we actually as adults don't care about a tree? Whatever that is, these are very personal decisions. So I hope that you will honor what needs to be done. But even again, day to day, I put these little pictures intentionally. Groups are great for some people. Others would prefer more of an individual setting to talk to a therapist and not have to hear other people's stories of heartache. Whatever works for you, I almost would encourage you to try both and just see how that goes for you. And book, I intentionally put book there. I get a lot of questions about grief books. I have a stack that I'm glad to show people and share. But I found, again, kind of like those words, they don't always sit well. Some are maybe very religious and they don't work for people that maybe were religious and are frustrated with how things went for their child, or people want more like kind of, you know, either secular, non-secular, maybe they're more spiritual, whatever it is. But if somebody sends you a book, again, that well-intentioned neighbor, coworker, and you really don't want to read it, I wouldn't read it. I would put it away. I would donate it. I would share it with a friend. I'm big into options, as I said, and taking undue pressure off of yourself. That person may or may not need to know that you never opened that book. I've heard this actually just probably from more than 30 people about how they never read the book or they never ate the casserole that the person bring to their home. The point, that's not the point. It's again, people wanting to help and you get to do what you want with that information. Okay, moving along to the next slide. This is a stage, these are another way to look at the stages of grief. So I won't spend too much time on these because I really want to make sure we have ample time for the parents. I do want to just say, number 6, reinvest. There is a method to this. Therese Rando is a psychologist. She's written, probably over 10 books on grief, and I really appreciate her work. And reinvest is finding something that you can get into. Maybe not the day or even the year after your child died, but eventually. Something that maybe used to bring you joy, drumming or pottery, or something new that you always wanted to try. Again, with the permission of trial and error. If you love it, do more of it. If it's not right for you, go on to the next thing. But investing and or reinvesting in something is ultimately a goal that I like to work with people on, individually and in groups. Okay, and next slide. So you're probably wondering why I didn't spend as much time on the holidays. It's mostly because, well, it's for a lot of reasons, but the holidays look different this year, as you all know. For some of you, it's the first year, and we will probably talk more with the panelists about the series of first. The first Father's Day without your child. The first year that it would have been the Make-A-Wish trip that perhaps your family never got to take. So that series of first is important. And that to me is like a whole different category with holidays. So I have some of your questions and I'll make sure that we can address those with regards to if it's the first holiday or not. And also, instead of reinventing the wheel, there are so many people now in this virtual world, so many therapists are literally around the world that have websites. This is just one of many. What's Your Grief? The website there. So instead of reinventing the wheel, I would encourage you, again, if you want to join one of the free webinars, discussions, Facebook meetups, all of that, to learn specifically from other parents about how to do that. Okay, next slide. So this sounds really simple. And I'll be honest with you that I had like about 5 more slides and more on here. But to me, this is kind of what it can really be reduced to, boiled down to. Drawing on those attributes of self, those 8 qualities that all begin with a C, that clarity, that knowing what you need for yourself and your family, and letting other people in your life know that. It might be as simple as saying, thank you for inviting me for Thanksgiving in your backyard. I'm planning on it, and I want to be there. Then I would give yourself permission to reevaluate in a week on Thanksgiving Day how you're feeling, and calling that person and saying, I will be there and we're looking forward to it. Please do talk about my son. That would be really helpful for us. Or I can't show up today. I hope you understand, and honoring that. Sometimes those people in our lives, they want to get it right and they might need our help. So I encourage you to be the advocate for what you need in terms of self-preservation, like we talked about, exercising or not, reading or not, going to a group or not, and also around the holidays, sitting with that decision. Hopefully it won't be an impulsive thing to say, I'm going to put up lights or not. Or Hanukkah means a lot in our family historically, but this year I've heard people talk about skipping holidays. We're just going to skip it, and to be okay with that decision. I'm going to pause there, and I have some things we can come back to that are more specific to the questions that you all asked ahead of time. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kate. We are now going to welcome questions from all of you. Please type any questions you have into the chat feature at the bottom of the Zoom window. We have already received questions at registration that Kate will go ahead and begin with our panels this evening.
Okay, I'm sorry, it wouldn't let me unmute myself again for a second, but okay. So as Heather mentioned, the parents that are so bravely here on this panel have a lot of wisdom, a lot more wisdom than I can pretend to offer. So I'm going to start with this question that says, I want to remember my daughter in the best possible ways. And this is coupled with another one with facing the holidays. How can I best honor my child during this season with rituals or not, kind of like I said about those choices. So we can start with any one of you that is feeling ready to start our conversation about what would you suggest to someone that wants to honor their child and around the holidays?
Yes, the first thing that comes to mind, and hi everybody, my name's, as introduced, Gary Painter, and I lost my daughter Jenna on Christmas Eve, now almost 14 years ago. I would just say that you are honoring your child that's lost as you take each day and every step, because your child's memory is with you. So in that sense, you are already honoring them. In terms of like thinking about something connected to a holiday, the things that have been really helpful for us, I think trial and error, as Kate mentioned before, is really important. But also for us, it was important to try some new things and also to try some things that we did do with Jenna when she was with us. And we also have 2 other children. Jenna was in the middle. And I think that for us, we never settled on the thing to do that was honoring to Jenna in that context, but instead, for us as a family to kind of try that mix of new and old, and each year to, kind of just be there with each other, whoever that is, whether it's just your spouse or whether it's other family members. I can tell lots of funny stories of when the new things didn't work, but I'll let others chat as well. And if we have time, I can share at least one of the funny stories.
Thanks, Gary. Yes, I hope we have time. That would be great to hear that. Yeah, and I think to piggyback on that, I'm seeing that a question that just came in is the best way to handle the holidays with our living children when one parent wants to celebrate and the other wants to escape. I'm going to pitch that one to Kelly, if you feel comfortable sharing that. This is a very good question. It looks like Carrie is asking this. It comes up a lot, and I have a few things that I can add, but Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe field that one?
Will do. My name is Kelly Tracy. I lost my son Matthew after a 9-year battle with a brain tumor. He passed away on Mother's Day. And I know we're heading into the Christmas and holidays and Thanksgiving and others, but I'm going to focus on Mother's Day because that's the one that's was the most challenging, because I do have a surviving child. He was 6 when Matthew passed. And for him, of course, he wanted to celebrate me for Mother's Day. And, they wanted to do all the big things. And honestly, that first year, my first Mother's Day, I just wanted to crawl into bed and pull the covers over my head and wake up the following Monday. We compromised. And I think that was important because I needed to understand that even though that day felt like it was all about me, it wasn't. So we started off the day with the traditional breakfast together, and we did that kind of thing. And then I had the rest of the day to do what made me feel good. So for me, I think sometimes the answer is trying to find a compromise that is acceptable to everyone without hurting anyone. And I know that's so much easier to say than it is to do. So.
No, that makes sense, Kelly, and thank you. And I think sometimes what we've said in groups when, two parents are there is that it's important to respect the other person's way. And I heard you say that word, but it doesn't mean you have to agree with it or like it. But finding that compromise is easier said than done, but I hope that can happen in your family. Okay, so thank you for sharing that. And this one says, family and friends do not talk about my child because they are afraid it will upset me. How do I let them know it's okay? Again, these are such important questions. And Jenny, how do you feel about speaking to that?
I definitely have, had this issue, but I think that everyone is kind of, especially that your first times in the holidays, everybody's kind of tense around you, which can make you even more frustrated. But we would, you know, as a family, when we felt comfortable, you know, talk about a funny story about, you know, my son that passed away, his name's Mason. So we always would have like a funny Mason story, or this was Mason's favorite food. And I think that loosens everyone up, and they kind of, you know, like once they know that it's okay with you, they'll start, you know, then bringing up their own stories. But I think that you really have to lead that conversation, at least at the beginning, because nobody, like you said, really knows what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing that, Jenny. And there's a book that I have in front of me now that made me think of this. It's a pastoral counselor in the Atlanta area who lost a child many decades ago to something non-brain tumor related. But he has this whole chapter about holidays and a paragraph called The Empty Chair. And kind of to piggyback again on what Jenny's saying, that he does talk about, I mean, his very thing was, you know, I was just remembering the time, ... this came up, kind of to do the icebreaker. If that feels like too much pressure, maybe you're saying to the person who's hosting ahead of time, can we please make it a point to say Matthew's name when we're all together? Does that make sense? So, but the empty chair. And I do know families that literally have an empty chair, and they talk to and about the person that is not able to be at the holiday meal. Okay, so one of the next question is, one of the hardest things is seeing other people's children and wishing my son was still alive. I don't like feeling envious or paralyzed to celebrate other children. Such an important topic, and another brave parent to ask that. Who's feeling, you know, I'm going back to Gary if we go around, but like I said, you can defer or pass.
I think with a lot of these sorts of issues, which are really tied to kind of the emotions of the loss, that there are times when you can engage with those emotions, and there are times when they're too overwhelming. And so, you know, with the last question, I think it's going to depend on those moments. So there's not going to be like, here's what you do in order to, you know, handle that situation in that moment, because, you know, that path forward may work in those particular moments, depending on how you're feeling. And then another day, it just simply won't. And so I think that, you know, I was just thinking about Carrie's question in the chat too. You know, when one parent is feeling one set of emotions and another parent's feeling another set of emotions, the most important thing there, I guess my wife and I have found, is not to be mad at each other for being at a different place, experiencing a different set of emotions. And, you know, the emotions around wanting to celebrate the holidays or wanting to avoid the holidays, or I feel are a very, you know, big example of being in a different place in that moment. And so it is about providing grace and care to each other in those moments, acceptance, I think others have said. But, you know, I just, it's hard to, other than to say it might work, you know, in this moment, or it may not work in that moment if I do these few things. I don't think that there is a path like you were showing with the scrambled road in that slide. I've seen other analogies like a ball of yarn where things are intertangled in ways that you can't just kind of unpack them in that way. So I don't know if I answered the question directly, but I guess I didn't have a direct, perfect answer.
No, I think that's a great answer. And I guess we didn't say this before, but if people do want to add to the chat or wanted anything to be clarified by any of us relative to the question that you posed, please feel free to do that as well. But for now, I'll go on to another question. So, and Kelly, again, I'll go to you and we'll go in order, but please feel free to chime in or defer if anyone else needs to. But we are aware that people used to surround us, they haven't been with us since our daughter passed away. how do we deal with this grief and loneliness? This feels, again, it's a big topic, but maybe more so now during this pandemic and the loneliness. So what are your thoughts on that, Kelly?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I think that, sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts on that. So now especially is and can be a very lonely time. And I know that, and I hope I'm understanding the question right, people that were there for you, but that maybe aren't there for you now. I think a lot of that can be because people don't know what to say, so they just say nothing. They don't know what to do, so they just do nothing. I had an experience, and this was actually before my son passed away, but we knew we were going to lose him. My very best friend just disappeared off the face of the earth. And I reached out to her and said, did I do something? Did I say something? Is there some reason why you're not here for me anymore? But I had that relationship with her that I felt like I'm going to fight for this one. I'm going to fight to keep this person in my life. I'm not going to experience the loneliness of having her be gone. And it honestly was that she says, but I don't know what to say. And I said, well, you don't have to say anything. Just call me, ask me how my day's going, tell me a dirty joke, just let me know that you're there. And I think that goes both ways. She needed to know that I needed her. So for me, it's just, if you need to feel that aloneness, then that's okay. But if you need people around you, I think it's okay to ask. I think it's okay to reach out because they may not know that you need them. So I don't know if that really answered the question, but that's.
Yeah, no, I hope that's helpful for whomever asked that. And I think, with grief, people have different metaphors and analogies. And I often think of this one like a sifter, like a sand toy. And sometimes, unfortunately, people that we really relied on before this death of a child, like sometimes they don't show up, or to Kelly's point, they don't know what to say and they don't say anything. So sometimes it's like the rocks, fall to the bottom. It's, and it shifts. I've seen people find new friends that they really like, other parents that might be able to relate. And they sometimes have to draw hard boundaries with relatives even, and some friends that just cause them more pain. So that again is a personal decision to make, but it's a tough one.
I'm just going to add on that, Kate, that I have not talked to any bereaved parent over the 10 years or so we've been involved with kind of bereavement camp and so forth that have actually had their friend circle increase after the loss of their child. It may happen. It is a sad reality that I think is somewhat universal for bereaved parents. There are people that just can't handle it. Sometimes it's their own personal grief. Sometimes it's not knowing what to say, but it is a fact. So, whoever shared that question, you're certainly not alone. It doesn't help that, because it is painful to lose connections that were also meaningful in a time when you've lost, such someone so dear. But I think, that is a reality that I've certainly seen universally.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And Jenny, I think I will ask you this question. This says, Christmas was Sarah's favorite holiday. How will I get through it without her? So you can speak to that personally or more generally, that's up to you.
I think something that we've done is to honor, because I think Mason would have really liked, he loved Christmas as well, but find another child in need. They don't need to know who it's from or whatever, but buy them the toy that you think that child would like at that age. So it just feels good inside. I mean, the family, it could be a total surprise to the family. You're not really doing it to get a thank you, but it just, it helps. That's something that.
I love that. To me, that sounds like yeah, it's like a random act of kindness, and it sounds like it's for both of you, the giver and the receiver or something. Yeah. Oh, that's a great story. Yeah. There's so many neat things that people have done to honor their child and help others at the same time. And I'm seeing that in the chat, some people are sharing about their personal story, and I appreciate your willingness to do that. And we probably have time for a few more questions. If there's one that I inadvertently overlooked, please share it in the group chat if you're comfortable doing that. I think, and I'll just talk for a moment. The same person that I referenced, Dr. Rando, who does the R's, those stages of grief. I really like this thing that she coined. It's called STUG, STUG, and it stands for sudden temporary upsurges of grief. I'm saying that now because I don't see that it's been, asked, but I do want to share that for some people, they anticipate the holidays being very hard, like the hardest, like you said, if to the parent that shared that Sarah loved Christmas, every once in a while, there's no guarantee, but every once in a while, the anticipation of that day can be harder than the actual day. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that, provides any comfort, but the STUG moments are what parents have shared with me. They're driving, all of a sudden a Beatles song comes on that was important to their family, and their child loved that song. And it's that moment where you're not expecting to, but you are overcome with grief. So I want to say that it doesn't mean that the holidays are going to be that much harder. I think every day as a bereaved parent is hard.
Mm-hmm.
I see the one question from Kathleen about her concern about her other daughter who is, missing her sister terribly, and, her best friend and so forth. And that was certainly the case with my daughter, Jenna. Her sister, Jillian, is 2.5 years younger than her. They were best friends. Their connections into and out of the family are in some ways based on the fact that they were sisters and in our family. And there's a loss of identity, there's a loss of a friend, there's a loss of the whole world gets kind of tipped sideways because those connections that were there prior to Jenna's illness are now, ripped away. And, only thing I can say is that part of our family's healing process in doing some new things were in part to kind of create new connections that, within the family that could be created. So for us, we have a son who was older than Jenna, daughter younger. They actually had almost no connection with each other except through Jenna because she was in the middle. And so in doing new things, whatever those were, some silly, others, like travel or whatever it might have been, what we noticed is that some of these new connections that could be made, that used to be through or connected to our daughter who died, in some sense got, new connections were forged. And one of the things in talking to bereaved parents that just to comfort, especially those of you who have only lost your child, less than 3 years ago, is that sometimes there's a real fear of those new connections are going to somehow displace your love and passion for the daughter that you've lost. And, given that now I'm 14 years since she died, I can tell you that that's not true, that making those new connections, new moments and so forth with, those other people in your life that you love actually never displaces your love and passion for in our case, Jenna, who we lost. And so, that and kind of like taking those small steps out in trial and error, it became safer to step out and take new steps, whether it was in the holidays or not. And again, the first few years we, took fewer new steps than later years. But I just wanted to share some of that with our family. It's as a parent, it's doubly heartbreaking, to see your other child suffering so much because of their own grief. And especially when they're younger, it's hard for them to know how to process that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kelly.
I wanted to respond to one of the questions. Sorry, I got kicked off for a minute.
No, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. So Julie asked about 5 years, people that have lost children more than 5 years ago, and how does that change? So Matthew passed away in 2009, so we're in year 11 now. And I can tell you that the first year for us was super hard. We traveled the week leading up to Christmas, but then we came back and actually celebrated Christmas at home. And one of the things that did for us was to, just as a little bit of history, was to give us something different to do and something to break up that anticipation of sorrow. But as we've gotten farther out, I don't want to say it gets easier, because I don't think it ever gets easier, at least not for me. It gets different. I think it gets different. You through that trial and error, like Kate was saying, you learn what works and what doesn't. And the farther out, I've discovered personally that more things work than not, because we figured out what absolutely will not work. So Julie, I want to just say, I think it's never going to be easy, but it's going to be different. And in some ways it will get a little bit better. I think you form that scar tissue over that wound, and that wound's always going to be there, but it's a little bit, your heart's a little bit more protected for me. And I know that, every parent's grief journey is very different, and no one can tell you exactly how things are going to work for you. But I think that for me, it gets different, and it gets a little bit easier, for lack of a better word.
Thanks, Kelly. That's useful. There's a quote that a parent shared. I don't know who to credit it to, but a bereaved parent shared that not until you've lost it.
Now I can hear you.
Oh.
I'm sorry, everybody. The quote, I'll read it again. This is a bereaved parent shared this. Not until you've lost a child do you know how it feels to be sad every single day, even when you experience joy. It's that both and of showing up for others in your life, but crying or being angry on the inside. And Jenny, is there anything else helpful or that you might want to share relative to questions that have been posed? Things that maybe, yeah.
I mean, the siblings, you know, it's still the hardest for us because it kind of depends on the age of the siblings. Because they don't, you know, kids don't want to sit around and be sad on Christmas. They want to be happy and just forget about it, and not forget, but just act like, you know, it's not happening. But so sometimes that can be upsetting to parents, but, you know, I feel like as my daughter's gotten older, she understands more of how we feel, but I think that's the toughest, because you want to do everything the best possible for your living children, but still honor the ones that aren't there. And I don't know, we struggle with that as well.
Do we have time for me to respond to Patrick's question? Patrick, you asked, how do you stop blaming yourself that you could have done something different? And I felt this way for a while. Matthew fought his brain tumor for 9 years. And his was originally a benign brain tumor, which we all know that when it's in the brain, it's not really benign, it's malignant by location. And he had, over those 9 years, he had 11 brain surgeries. And 5 of those years, he didn't have any. So really he had 11 in 4 years. He had 2 different courses of radiation. When his tumor started to grow again, and we were going in and having surgery after surgery, and I pushed for them because the first radiation was so effective. I really wanted them to look at doing that again. Matthew's tumor underwent a malignant conversion, which is very rare. And we know that we suspect that it probably did that because of that second round of radiation. Now, the doctors were on board, so it wasn't me pushing them to do something they didn't want to do. We didn't have a whole lot of options. And I had the hardest time thinking, if I hadn't been so in support of having this second round of course of radiation done, would this have happened? Would he still be here? What did I do? Did I make the right decision? And what worked for me is knowing that with the doctors and with the experts, and we had people from all over the country looking at his case there at the end, we made the best decisions possible with the information that we had at the time. And I think if you remind yourself of that, that helps a little bit. I realized that I wasn't the only one making those choices or not making those decisions or doing or not doing. It was a group effort, and we did the best we could with what we had. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah. I hope it does too. There's so many things to say about this important topic. I want to be mindful of the time. It sounds like Heather's going to share resources. So if you weren't able to jot things down or you have follow-up questions, I really want to thank the parents that are here. Is there all of you that are participating, but on the panel, is there any closing remarks? I really would like you to have those.
Nothing else. I think I shared my final thoughts previously. Just reach out for those connections, whether they're new or old, to walk with you through these difficult times.
Yeah. How about you, Jenny?
Yeah, I would just say take it day by day. And honestly, like you said, just the days thinking of what's going to happen at the holiday event, or, you know, that to me was way worse than the actual day. So just, you have to remember you're going to make it, but it's hard to convince yourself sometimes.
Thanks, Jenny. How about you, Kelly?
Just be kind to yourself. I think that's the most important thing. Be kind to yourself. Whatever you're feeling is okay. There's nothing wrong with how you're feeling, whether it be despair or joy. You're absolutely allowed to feel joyful. You're absolutely allowed to embrace the good moments. So just be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of our panelists for their time today and for sharing your journeys with all of us. We wanted to take a moment now, and for those of you who are comfortable, invite you to turn on your cameras so that we can see the larger community, so that you can all virtually gather in this safe space together this evening. Thank you. And hello. Thank you for your participation, for your thoughtful questions, for attending tonight, and sharing with all of us on here a little bit of your journey, a little bit of your families, a little bit of your children. The PBTF is here to help you no matter where you are in this journey. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us for support. There's contact information on the slide. And we will be sending a link to the recording of this special virtual discussion. And we'll also send the slides at the email address you registered with so that you have the resources that Kate has shared tonight and you have our contact information. And we hope you will reach out. We are here for you. So thank you all again for this evening and be safe.